Volkswagen will introduce its first purpose-built electric car next year, and this is it, the ID.3. So called, at least in part, because it's expected to usher in a third age of success for its maker, after those defined by the original Beetle and the Golf. The ID.3 could be a landmark in the rise of the electric passenger car. This is the first model born of an investment worth a staggering €50 billion over the next 6 years from Volkswagen. By 2025, it'll have 3 factories making ID-branded electric cars in Germany alone, 2 more in China and 1 in North America, and between them all, the company expects to be making 1 million electric cars a year. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.
This is the electric car's big watershed moment then? Maybe. To be honest, some manufacturers doubt whether there is the appetite just yet for any one of them to be making and selling 1 million EVs a year. After all, as we know, they won't be giving them away. However, all that stuff is for another day. Today, I'm one of a very lucky select group of journalists who gets to drive the new ID.3. It's not the finished production version, it's a late prototype under camouflage, as you can see, or maybe you can't see.
With battery capacities ranging from 45 to 77 kilowatt hours and claimed range from about 200 all the way up to nearly 350 miles. It'll be unveiled at the Frankfurt Motor Show in September and on UK roads from April 2020.
So the car is like most European EVs in that it'll charge from a regular Type 2 connector from your wall box at home and also from a CCS rapid charger at the motorway services, and it will charge from one of those at up to 125 kilowatts, which is pretty rapid. That'll do an 80% charge, even with a bigger battery, in well under 45 minutes. One other thing we like also, the charging point for the car isn't on the front, it's here at the back, just like it was on an e-Golf. And that means you don't have to drive forward into parking bays, which we like. Okay, so welcome to the city of Wolfsburg. This is the ID.3. The interior of the car is kind of the first interesting thing about it, really. So it's the size of a Mark 7 Golf. In fact, it's a little bit shorter, but inside it feels bigger. This one, most of the interior is covered up, so I can't tell you much about how the infotainment looks or the dashboard itself. It's all going to stay covered for today, but I'm pretty big, 6'3". I'm not the kind of guy who would choose to sit in the back of most hatchbacks. I can sit in the back of this one fine. Maybe not lots and lots of headroom, a similar amount of headroom that you would get in a Golf.
You have to remember that's because the battery pack is under the floor, so the floor is slightly raised up, and that's why on the outside the car needs big wheels in order to look right.
From the driving position here, you kind of see some of the bonnet, but not too much. And the front of the car just drops away in front of you. So you know the bonnet's really short because you just saw it from the outside, but you can't see the end of the car in front of you. And it feels a little bit strange to be driving what you know is a really short car, but not quite see the extremities of it. It's the way it is with the windscreen being so raked, because one of the things this car will offer is an augmented reality head-up display. They needed a lot of room on the dashboard ahead of the steering wheel and in front of the windscreen to integrate that really big screen so that the whole thing would work. It's not often you see a car's design proportions influenced in that way by interior technology, but I guess that's where we are with cars these days. Driving position's comfortable, feels a little bit high, but pretty normal for a hatchback. I've been controlling the transmission on a button which is just on the instrument panel ahead of me. It's a bit like a BMW i3 in that respect. You select the transmission on a rotary controller just on the side of the IP, and it looks like all of the speedometer, all the instruments, it'll all be on that instrument screen. How's it to drive? It's good. It's an electric car. It's one of these cars that is, in some ways, it feels bigger than you expect it to feel because it's it's going to be a heavy car, between 16 and 1700 kilos depending on the battery you have. So it's going to weigh more than the average hatchback, but it's shorter too, and it's got a really tight turning circle. That came as a surprise to me. But when you're in a car park, maybe when you're doing a U-turn, you certainly feel the benefit of a turning circle that I think is as low as, it's less than 10 meters, which is it's not far off a turning circle of a Smart 4 or something. That's going to make the car really maneuverable in town. It's going to be a real selling point, I think, for a lot of people.
It's maneuverable, it's good to drive, it's easy to drive, but if you're expecting this to be a new Beetle just because it's rear-wheel drive, well, it doesn't quite feel like that.
The ride of the car, I mean, this one isn't finished, this is a prototype, so there's a lot of things on this car that aren't quite ready yet. One of them's a brake pedal calibration, the other one's a suspension tuning. It's still a bit of a work in progress, but it feels pretty good. The steering's quite light. It's sort of medium direct. It's not too fast. It's not like an i3. It feels like a Volkswagen, you know. It's sort of as you expect it to be. It's natural. It's intuitive.
So, the ID3 isn't Volkswagen's first electric car, but it's different enough from the electrified versions of the Golf and Up that we already know that you could certainly think of it as its first proper go. It's built on a dedicated EV-specific model platform called the MEB.
This is what the ID3 looks like underneath. This is the new Volkswagen MEB platform, which does not stand for Midlands Electricity Board. As you can see, there's a lot of battery. This is the middle-sized battery version, so that is a 58 kilowatt-hour battery right there. If you have the smaller battery version, interestingly, you get the same battery casing. It's only 2/3 full of cells. If you go for the big one, the 77 kilowatt-hour one, you get another pair of modules on the far end of the battery pack, as you can see. So the battery basically fills the whole floor of the car. It's a lot of battery for a car this size, but otherwise, well, there's plenty to say. The drive motor, the transmission is all at the rear. You've got a 201 horsepower electric motor just at the back there. You've got drive to the rear wheels. So for suspension, you've got a multi-link system at the back. You've got McPherson struts at the front. So anything on this model that's light silver is made out of aluminium. Otherwise, the structure is all steel. So that's pretty standard for this sort of size hatchback. But obviously, interestingly, with everything being packaged at the back, in terms of driving and transmission, it leaves room at the front for the front wheels to move, which is why you've got a car with such a nice tight turning circle that's so easy to drive around town. So what you expect, of course, is to feel the influence of the rear-mounted engine and the rear-wheel drive in the way the car rides and handles. And the truth is, you don't really feel it, at least not as much as you expect to. And that's because this is an electric car with a big, heavy battery right in the middle of the wheelbase, right between the wheels. So the battery is much heavier than anything else as part of the drivetrain package. That makes the weight distribution perfect, 50-50. So it just feels like a bigger, slightly heavier take on an average family hatchback.
There are two powertrain specs. You can get either 148 horsepower or 201. Both of them have nearly 230 pounds-foot of torque, and we're driving the more powerful one.
They feel really strong. Obviously, you don't have to change gear. You don't really have to think too hard about the traffic around you when you take off from standing, because you're always going to have enough performance, and the car is really quiet too. It's got an automatic noise generator on it because as of this year, all electric cars need to have one. It's mandated by the law. But Volkswagen is still working on it. They haven't quite decided exactly what the car will sound like and what this engine noise will be. And apparently there are people saying there should be a standard engine noise because they're worried that in the future in European cities that are full of electric cars, every different electric car will make a different noise. And so it'll be like a night at the opera or something. You know, you'll be like a menagerie of electric cars all tweeting and chirping and whining and God knows what that will be like. Anyway, we've already talked about capacities a little bit. This is the middle-sized battery, so it's 58 kilowatt hours, but that's usable net capacity. So the battery itself is actually bigger, but because you only use 90% of it, whatever it is, Volkswagen will only claim that usable capacity, and it's unique, or certainly different amongst most EV makers in doing that. And the reason it's chosen that tactic is because battery capacity is one of the things it warrants on this car. So if you buy an ID3 and in 8 years' time your car has less than 70% of the usable battery capacity than it had when it was new, then you get a replacement battery under warranty. They realise that if they quote gross battery capacity rather than net battery capacity, then they're going to end up paying out quite a lot of warranty claims, because the first thing you do is realise that you might have whatever, a 65 kilowatt gross battery, but you're only using 58 kilowatt hours of that in kind of typical motoring, and so you've already lost like 15% of the capacity, and that's not the right way for them to start. So anyway, they're hoping the industry comes with them. Everybody else starts quoting net battery capacity instead of gross. And what that means anyway, in terms of range, this car has a WLTP range claim of just over 250 miles, I think. So I know what you want to know. Does this feel like a breakthrough for the electric car?
Is the Volkswagen ID3 the car that's going to change the world? Well, it might change its own little corner of it. This is not just an electric car after all. It's innovative, it's techy, it's practical, and it's different, so there's a lot to like about it besides the zero emissions powertrain. Great Volkswagens have always had that ability to offer more than meets the eye, and the ID3 certainly does that. And because it's an EV with the world's largest car maker standing behind it, somehow it's easier to take seriously than others as well. It's got credibility to match the environmental call.
The truth is, it could be. It could be the car that changes the world a little bit.
If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe.